This is really nice. What a great cover this one is. Mandrake. Look at this. It's got that Wicker Man vibe to it, hasn't it, you know? To me, anyway. Look at this all black cover. Look at the spine on it. Tiny bit of fading, but still pretty good. 2491. Look at this. What a great condition book that is. Quite unusual in that condition. And don't know much about that at all, that particular title. But yeah, there it is. Clearly Penguin science fiction. Also, it's not laminated. It's got like a more matte cover on it, which I also thought was a bit unusual.
From Jules Burt Book Hall, Now to My Hands. Mandrake by Susan Cooper, 1964. Welcome to Vintage SF. I'm Richard Rempel. Just before Christmas, I received this book in the mail from Jules Burt. I had sent him a book earlier in the year, and he told me he had a special surprise for me. I'd never heard of Mandrake. Originally published in 1964, the paperback rights went to Penguin, who published it under their line Penguin Science Fiction. This is the only paperback printing of Mandrake. Was the decision to hold off reprinting Mandrake justified, or should there have been more printings? Let's talk about the author and the book. Susan Marie Cooper was born May 23, 1935, and she's still with us. She's 89 years old. She's an English author of children's books, best known for The Dark is Rising, a fantasy series set in England and Wales, which incorporates British mythology such as the Arthurian legends and Welsh folk heroes. Cooper attended University of Oxford, and after graduating she worked as a reporter for the Sunday Times under Ian Fleming and wrote in her spare time. During that period, she began work on the series The Dark is Rising, and she finished her debut novel, a science fiction novel named Mandrake, published by Hodder and Stoughton in 1964. In 2024, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association named her the 40th Damon Knight Memorial Grand Master in recognition of her significant contributions to the literature of science fiction and fantasy. Written in 1964, this novel imagines a future of 1980, an Orwellian type of future. Our protagonist is an anthropologist, David Queston. He's returning from some research in Brazil. In his travel home, he's requested to meet with the Minister of Planning for England, who goes by the name Mandrake. This name in some ways was a red herring for this novel. If you're familiar with Mandrake Root or Mandrake legends in fantasy, then you might have been suspecting something coming in this novel. I know I was, but it doesn't play out that way. Mandrake eventually becomes Prime Minister of England. We have a time jump, and David Queston has been writing a book isolated in a cottage for about 2 years. He's brought out of this isolation by people from the Ministry of Planning knocking at his door. This agency is urging all people to go back to their place of birth. If you're not from England, then you should be leaving England. It becomes a policy of isolation. This part of the novel had a building dread to it. Cooper's writing really brought out that sense of foreboding. It reminded me in some ways of our years of COVID, how we had to basically isolate at home. This is the future that Cooper is talking about here. Soon cities become walled and no one is allowed to travel. It sounds preposterous. Cooper does a good job of building this framework so that we actually believe that this is happening in England. Queston eventually tries to break free and travels the countryside. It is almost an apocalyptic landscape. He gains some companions, in particular a woman named Beth. As they journey, there are threats, and there's also passages of philosophy. There are also some strange events happening, earthquakes and weather events. Queston feels that it's almost like the Earth is an intelligence of its own, rebelling against those who are using nuclear weapons and ravaging the Earth itself. So it's this sense of isolation and of the Earth rebelling that continue to create this foreboding in the novel. I mentioned that this novel reminded me of COVID and the times of isolation. It also made me wonder if a leader or a nation could focus on isolating themselves. Is this a good defense mechanism? What happens if we don't communicate with the other nations and other people of the world? Is it simply a play for control of your population? Worthy questions, I think. This is Cooper's first novel. It reminded me in some ways of D.G. Compton's The Silent Multitude, the ominous foreboding, as I've mentioned, and the falling apart of society. While accomplished in establishing this mood, this feeling, the novel itself, plot-wise, didn't quite live up to it. The conclusion in particular seemed to be a bit of a letdown. Now, who might like this novel? I think people who are real completionists of Cooper's work would be very interested in this adult science fiction novel. It gives you a snapshot of her early work, her first work. Other readers who like Orwellian literature about control, isolationists, and apocalyptic landscapes may find this interesting too. So, should this novel have received more than one paperback printing? Perhaps, but I'm a bit on the fence on this. I give it a 6.5 out of 10. In the description to this video, I will have a link to a PDF copy online of Mandrake. I will also have a link to Jules Burt's channel. Have you read Susan Cooper's Mandrake? What are your thoughts? Do you think it deserves to be brought back into print? Until next time, keep reading.